What's up, everybody? My name is Ben, and I make a lot of Apple content. I talk about iPhones a lot, but today I have something different. I got a Galaxy Z Flip 3. So we're gonna set it up and just see how it is to use an Android phone in 2024. So here it is. This is a Galaxy Z Flip 3. So let's dive in and just set it up and get all my impressions as an iOS user using this thing. So right off the bat, obviously this hardware is massively more interesting than just about every iPhone that we've had in the last 5 years at least. Just the fact that it folds and can become this small, simple profile is super nice, super unique. And there's a reason why Apple has never tried this, and we're going to get into that, but that can't ignore the fact that this is really a special and unique experience that you have here with the Z Flip 3. Now, immediately right off the bat, you notice as an iPhone user just how tall this phone is. Now, if you're from my channel, you know that I use smaller iPhones like the iPhone SE and the iPhone 12 mini. And obviously this phone is much taller than those, but even just comparing it to like a regular sized iPhone, this phone is weirdly tall. My thumb can only reach it up to about this far up in the screen, which is kind of unwieldy, to be honest. It's a bit of a bar of soap when you try to hold it. Okay, now that I got it set up, I just wanted to look at Android as a whole, and of course this version of Samsung's One UI. Now, right off the bat, it's surprisingly busy, especially when you swipe over and you see all these pre-installed apps, all this stuff from AT&T, and then you go over here and you have the Google feed. There's just a lot going on this phone that when you have an iPhone, you log into it for the first time and it's just that basic Apple experience and those apps you actually need. So it's a bit of a surprise to have, all of this stuff that I have to remove from the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and sign into all my accounts, and then we'll just see how it is when I start to actually get comfortable with this phone. One thing that I do really like about this phone is how bright and how vibrant the screen is. There's something that Samsung does with these displays that is just so much more vibrant, so much more eye-popping than what we have on a typical iPhone display. And frankly, it's pretty amazing, especially with the 120 hertz panel that we have on this phone. It's a pretty impressive, and it's just a nice place to be when you're looking at this screen. Also, this external display is I really like being able to just plug it in, have it charging, and look at the charge status right here, look at the time, tap it, and be able to swipe between music controls, alarms. It's really a super smart little addition to this phone. And there's just something really cool with what Samsung has done with this foldable experience, where the phone adjusts to its foldable nature. I love how you have these media controls when you use YouTube, and how it just kind of lends itself nicely to the foldable nature that it has. So like the same thing goes for the camera, of course. You have this cool little setup here where you can have the viewfinder up top and then have the controls down here, and you can set it up to take pictures in a way that you really just can't do with a normal phone. So like if I wanted to take a sort of like time-lapse video here of my neighborhood, I could just set it up here, and it's almost like having a tripod where I can just have it sit there and be in a position that isn't just flat on the ground. And there's just some little cool touches with having a foldable phone that I think are really awesome. Another example of that is how you can use a sort of touchpad experience here when you're browsing through photos. This is super cool, and when I first discovered it, I was just blown away at how nice it is and how cool it is to use this sort of laptop-like experience on your foldable smartphone. So I think overall this phone is fun in a way that iPhones just haven't been in a long time. iPhones have just kind of been the same formula for the last 5+ years, ever since the iPhone 10 came out, there's really not much different about the iPhone experience. So I simply love to see that Samsung is trying new things, trying to push the market and make experiences that are genuinely new and different. Now, before I talk too much more about the experience of using this phone, I want to talk a bit about the durability aspect of this phone. Now, I got this one for super cheap because it has a little crease line with some cracks in the plastic display of the phone, which makes it a little bit less pleasant to swipe over. And also, as I've been using it, the screen itself goes black sometimes. Sometimes you fold it up and it just dies. So there's a reliability component to these foldable phones that is just not there. I think it's not quite yet a proven technology, and there's a reason why that most people are still using standard bar style phone designs, is because this, as mature of a technology as it has been able to come in the last 5 years or so, is still not 100% there in terms of long-term reliability. And I'll show you a little bit closer what that looks like here in a second. So of course, this is a foldable phone, so you're gonna have that crease in the middle of the display, which is kind of weird for the first few times when you're swiping across it, because you just don't expect that. Also, as you see on this phone, and as I mentioned in the last clip, there's some cracking along the display there. And I've frequently seen on a lot of these models that the screen will just go black eventually along there. These screens are super prone to breakage, and since the screen is plastic, you get little nicks and little just kind of wear patterns on it that you usually wouldn't get when you have a glass display. And of course, like I was mentioning, half the time when I open it, the screen is black and it just doesn't even turn on. And one thing I didn't really think about, but that is really difficult with this phone, is opening it up with one hand. And it's just kind of a pain, honestly, if you're like trying to do something else with your other hand, trying to pull this thing out of your pocket from a folded state and then actually open it is a bit difficult. And it usually involves having to use your leg or something as kind of leverage to finish folding it open. One thing I do appreciate about Samsung is how they offer you several methods of biometrics or authentication into the phone. So not only do you have the face unlock, which actually works surprisingly well when you're in a bright situation, but you also have that fingerprint unlock that's there on the side. And to me, I vastly prefer this side fingerprint scanner than I do the in-screen fingerprint scanners. I think there's something that's missing with the tactility of an on-screen fingerprint scanner, because there's nothing to tell you that this isn't the place where you put your finger, or this isn't, or this is. When you're just not really looking at the phone, it takes a certain degree of muscle memory to even know where to put your finger, while with an actual physical button that you can put your finger on, it unlocks really quickly and nicely. And now here comes the big question then, is how is Android as a whole, and especially Samsung's One UI experience? Now, I've been on an iPhone for quite a while now, but I did have a Pixel phone just a little while ago, probably about a year ago. I was on a Pixel 7 for a few weeks before I went back to the iPhone. So I'm not as used to Samsung's One UI. But that being said, I'm actually surprisingly liking it. I think it's a nice, pretty experience. There's lots of colors, there's a nice simplicity to it that just kind of makes sense. And especially what I love is just the level of options that you have in terms of your navigation options, in terms of changing your keyboard, in terms of changing, the way your home screen looks. There's so many different options that iOS is starting to catch up with, but is simply not on the same level as this. Now, one thing I don't like about this experience, though, is when it comes to using the keyboard, there's so many different buttons and options going on here that it's a little bit overwhelming. I think coming from the iPhone, Apple has a grasp of what you want out of your phone, in a way that I think Samsung is more like, let's throw all the options at you and let you figure out what you want. And of course, I can change the keyboard to, the Google keyboard or whatever I want, but still I think there's a certain level of simplicity that just isn't here. So as somebody who's been on an iPhone for a while, it is overwhelming just how much is going on throughout the menus of this phone, and trying to think about how I'm going to configure it to how I like it. But that's the reason why there's so much of a following with Android phones, of course, is that you can do so much more with them. So after setting this up and using it a little bit, I'm actually surprisingly impressed at the way that I enjoy this phone. It's surprisingly satisfying to fold it up, put it in your pocket, and have it take up so much less space than the massive phablety phones that we're used to these days. And it's surprisingly just a good phone. I'm also impressed at Samsung's overall experience with the software they created. While it's not simple, there's a lot of options in place. There's a certain cleanness to the design of it that I think works really well. The one thing I do think is missing is more of a Material You sort of theme and design. And I get a little bit annoyed that when I use or install an app that does use Material You, like any of the Google Suite apps or any of the more modern designed apps on the Play Store, that they don't really match up with what's going on with the rest of the operating system with what Samsung has on here. So it's just a little bit of a shame, and that's kind of why I usually lean towards Pixel phones. But I'm actually really impressed with this phone. I think it's an excellent effort from Samsung. And while there are some durability sort of issues with the foldable design of it that I think should give anybody pause before they really invest in one of these phones, I think this is a surprisingly impressive and good experience. And take a look at the used market to check out just how cheap some of these are. It's surprisingly cheap to get a used Samsung phone that really still offers you an incredibly solid experience. So I hope you all enjoyed just my little thoughts on the Galaxy Z Flip 3, Samsung, and using Android phones as a whole in 2024. So let me know down below your thoughts, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.